Welcome! Today, we're going to tackle something that feels like it's straight out of science fiction, but it's really happening all around us, every second of the day. We're going to break down how computers can actually read financial news and, get this, understand its mood. Think of it like a money mood ring for the entire global market.
Okay, so let's just think about this for a second. The financial world today is an absolute fire hose of information. You've got news wires, you've got company reports, social media updates. It's just this constant, relentless flood. For any one person, or even a whole army of people, to try and read all of that in real time, it's literally impossible.
So, here's the big question. The big what if. What if we could just hand that impossible job over to a machine? You know, something that doesn't need to sleep, never gets tired, and can scan millions of articles in the time it takes us to blink. That's the puzzle we're going to solve today.
Now, to really get why this matters, we first have to understand just how huge the problem is. And honestly, drowning in financial news is a pretty good way to put it. Just look at this number. We're talking about over 1 million articles, reports, and updates hitting the internet every single day. This right here is why humans alone just can't do it. The scale is just mind-boggling.
So how in the world do you get a computer to dig through that mountain of text and actually find something useful? Well, this is where things get really cool. You basically have to teach it how to read. But not in the way you and I read.
So if you just tell a computer, hey, count the most common words in all these financial articles, this is what you get. The computer's first attempt. It's a big cloud of words like the, of, to, and in. I mean, it's not wrong, but it's completely useless for figuring out what's actually going on.
And this is where it gets smart. The next step is to teach the computer to just ignore all those common, boring words. They're often called stop words. And boom, suddenly the real picture starts to emerge. You see the words that actually matter in finance. Dollar sign, million, company, quarter. It's all about filtering out the noise to find that signal.
Okay, great. So now our computer can pick out the important keywords. That's a huge step, but it's only half the battle. Now comes the really tricky part, teaching it to understand the feeling behind those words.
Great, this is the million-dollar question, literally. Seeing the word million is one thing, but was it $1 million profit or $1 million loss? The words around it change everything. So how does a machine figure out that difference? And right here, this is the big aha moment. What we do is create huge lists or dictionaries of words, and we assign them a feeling. Words like increase, rose, and growth, well, those get tagged as positive. And words like decrease, loss, and fell, you guessed it, they get tagged as negative. The machine can now sort all those keywords into good and bad piles.
And this whole process we've been describing, it actually has a name. It's called sentiment analysis. That's the technical term for it. It's all about programming a computer to read a piece of text and make a judgment call on whether the person who wrote it sounds positive, negative, or just neutral.
Now, I know this might start to sound a little bit like magic, but I promise you it's not. Underneath this simple idea of good words and bad words, there's actually some pretty clever math going on. You know, at the end of the day, it all comes down to a simple score. Profit might get a +1, loss gets a -1. A really strong word like sword might get a +2, while something awful like plummeted gets a -2. Then the computer just adds up all the scores in an article to get one final overall sentiment score. Simple as that.
So, while it's fun to picture a friendly little robot like this one reading the news, what's really happening behind the scenes is that incredibly complex algorithms are just tearing through data, calculating all those scores across thousands of articles in an instant. All right, so we've taught a computer to read and to sort of feel. So what? Why does any of this actually matter in the real world? Well, in finance, the reason is pretty obvious, right? It lets traders and investors get an immediate read on the market's mood. But and this is the really cool part. This technology is everywhere. Companies use it to analyze your product reviews. Brands use it to track what you're saying about them online. Even political campaigns use it to figure out public opinion. It's a crazy powerful tool for understanding what people are thinking on a massive scale. So let's wrap this all up. What are the big things to remember here? First, computers can actually be taught to read the emotion in text using this thing called sentiment analysis. Second, we need this because it's one of the only ways to make sense of the insane amount of data in our world. Third, it's a huge deal, powering decisions in everything from finance to marketing. And last, this one's really important. While it's an amazing tool, it's not a perfect crystal ball. Things like sarcasm or really complex irony, yeah, machines are still pretty bad at picking those up.
So you always have to remember its limits.
And that brings us to a final thought to chew on. We've gone from teaching a machine to just count words to teaching it to understand feelings. As these systems get even better and more nuanced at reading not just what we write, but how we truly feel, what do you think is next?